Asia Mape, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. I love all of the work you're doing for sports parents. Your website, I Love to Watch You Play, is just such an incredible resource. And I'm sure my parents would have loved to have that when I was going through the whole sports process. But I just love that there is a place for parents to just learn about everything that they're navigating in this world of just information overload in sports and how to go about the recruiting process and how many teams can we be on at once and then overuse injuries and just all these things. So, we're going to get into all that today, but before, I want you to just give a background on your sports journey. You've worked for some major networks like ESPN and the NFL network, and then you shifted to launch this website and help parents. So, kind of what led you to this point?
First off, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of your work and I've been following you as well. And I think, we're both of that mindset of you can have high performance and you can accomplish a lot of things, but you need to do it in a smart way and a practical way, in a way that makes sense for your family and your body and for your child. So thank you for all the great work you're doing and putting out that message too, because I think sometimes people who are in the performance field, right? They get really focused on that and kind of don't see that whole child. And I see a lot of your posts include a lot of really good positive practices. So I really love your work and I'm really excited to be here. My background, I loved sports. I love sports. Out of the womb, I think I was like rearing to go. I have two older brothers and I was always trying to keep up with them. In every home video, you can kind of hear the dribbling of a basketball or see me like run through the frame. I'm not even kidding. It's hysterical. I just always wanted to have a ball in my hand. It didn't really matter which ball. I gravitated towards basketball, but I played every sport. And at night I would sit in my room and work on my shot up in my bedroom, just rotation. And I just loved it. I loved everything about sports. And I think I got a lot of confidence from sports. Um, I was pretty good. And, I think that sort of when you're trying to keep up with two, and my brothers were not close in age either, and they loved sports. So I literally, that was my goal, to play anything and everything they were doing at all times. And so, I worked really hard. It was also a good escape. I had a single mom. We were growing up in Detroit and she was going through hard times. At one point we were on welfare and things were tough back then. And my mom, I always like to say this because I share this story sometimes. She ended up getting her college degree, working for the governor of Michigan, becoming a lobbyist. She's a huge success story and one of my biggest inspirations. But back then it was hard. And I think sort of it was a nice escape. I just would go outside and shoot baskets and forget about all the things we had going on. And so I think the combination of it being like something away from the home and the things we had going on and the confidence, that I really gravitated towards it and loved it. And I kept going, as even as my mom you know was kind of improving our life situation and everything was getting better and better. It was just in me. I just loved it. I played every second I could. My high school basketball team, I played softball too in high school just 1 year, and then I just decided I didn't love I went out to play for with my friends and they were all put on freshman team and I was put like on the varsity team. I was like, I was doing this for fun and it just wasn't fun. I was like, this is my second sport. And so I didn't play after that, but I did play basketball and played a year in college as well at Coastal Carolina, a small Division 1 school in South Carolina. And so, after that, I had the bug. I was studying journalism at the University of Michigan and I was like, why am I going to go into news journalism? I'll just go into sports journalism. And ever since then, basically, Erica, everything I've done throughout my entire life has kind of had a touch of sports in it. My work for 20 years, as you were saying, I worked for all these big networks and I had the best job on the planet. I travel around and interview athletes and experts and professionals in sports. And I did that for 20 plus years and I loved it. and my bridesmaids were, like, mostly my teammates. I mean, really, sports has been a part of everything, and so, when I was started to have my kids and figuring out what my next steps were, someone approached me, someone I used to work with and said, "This youth sports thing is pretty crazy, like, I feel so overwhelmed by it, and maybe we should create something around it." And at the time, I was working full time still, and it was more of a passion project, but I was like, "Yeah, let's do it," because we thought we really had a lot to share. We both worked in sports television and had been on the sidelines interviewing all these people and, you know, working in the field, and so we're like, "Let's give it a shot," and it was really just at first just a passion project, and that's sort of how I Love to Watch You Play came about.
So, when you were growing up, I love that you used the word escape. And I feel sports should be that for every single kid. It should just be out of pure joy and just this activity you do where you're in the moment and you don't have any other cares in the world. But did you have any moments where it was overwhelming, kind of how parents are talking about sports today? Or was it totally different when you were growing up? And why might it have been different?
I don't remember that. I do remember feeling nervous. I mean, we had a great team and, we were in the championship game in the state, and, like, that felt I remember, like, those nerves and all of that. My mom was the opposite of, like, an intense sports parent, so she, like I mean, to the point where it aggravated me, like, I was really hard on myself, and that's something I'm sure we'll get into later, but when it's left to the kid to sort of drive the bus and to sort of make their own journey, no one's telling you what to do, so you want it maybe even more. Like, it was all about me and my own drive, and so, like, I would get in the car after a terrible game. I remember one instance, and my mom was like, "Oh, but that great pass you had in the second quarter," or whatever, and I was like, "Ugh," like, she was so positive. It drove me bananas, and I think actually it almost did me a disservice because I remember thinking when I have my own kids, I'm gonna be really straightforward with them, and I'm just gonna tell them like it is, and, I wanted a little more from her. I wanted to get better. I wanted to know what I did wrong. I wanted some insider information, or at least I thought I did, right? I don't know. You always want what you don't have. And so I never felt pressure to play. I don't She didn't see one college game of mine, and not because she didn't love me or didn't care. She was busy. She had a very, big career at that point. And so, I never felt that. And my dad, who actually I credit with a lot of my sort of athletic abilities just because he was a karate teacher and a yoga teacher, and so from a tiny, tiny age, I was very immersed in different types of movement and different things, but he lived across the country, and he would ask me about my games or whatever, but there was never any, pressure, no.
That's super interesting because I've interviewed a lot of former Division 1 athletes on this podcast, and they say it was the exact same childhood experience where their parents just kinda left them alone, and they just developed that passion for themselves that has been the universal theme to all these athletes who got to a high
Right.
level. Now, why is it not good for the parent to be so involved and micromanaging the kid's sports journey, and why can that sometimes have the opposite effect they want it to have in the end?
When it becomes about them and what they want, and I don't ever bash parents. I've been there. I was one of them. But when that scale sort of tips towards pressure or towards more about what the parent wants, I mean, if you think about it yourself, if your mom is always telling you to do something, it's not then the rewards of it don't feel like yours. You don't really own it. It's like it takes all of the sort of intrinsic motivation away from you. And I think that, like, most parents mean well. I think that we really want to help, and we just don't know how. I mean, it's hard enough just to be a parent, but a sports parent kind of takes it to this next level. where think about all the crazy fans, right, watching, especially European soccer games or here with our football or, like, whatever it is, and you don't even have a stake in the game. You don't have a person playing that game. Sports in already is sort of like gets your, motor going, gets you excited, gets you fired up, and then you throw into that mix, you know, a little child, a little person that, came from you or that you raised or that you love, and it's just a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep that balance and that sanity, and it's sort of like, unfortunate because I think until a parent goes through it and comes out the other side, like I did with my oldest, we don't have that perspective and we don't see the damage that it's causing. And we don't see how our good intentions are actually doing the opposite of what we're hoping for. Whatever that dream we have for them, and that's the first problem. It needs to be their dream, but even if it's like part of what we want for them too, it's still not gonna be a good result if it's driven by us and if we're putting too much pressure and we're sort of the balance is not, in place any longer.
What do you think are some of the biggest issues today's youth sport parent deals with in just everything that's going on? I mean, there's 5 club teams per age group. There's different, like, national championship tournaments, there's showcases, like, there's just so much. So, what are some of the biggest issues they have to navigate in this?
It's crazy, right? And I think that's what's really hard is there's 2 things that kinda stand out is the FOMO. So, like, you see your neighbor's kid, "Oh, where's Susie gonna play? Oh, she's gonna play on the elite, blah, blah, blah." You're like, "Oh, maybe we need," like, even if you didn't kind of start out that way, as you see everybody and then you see these kids improving and you start to feel like your kid is gonna be left behind. There's a super big problem with fear of missing out with a lot of sports parents. And then, the other one is return on investment, right? We do start to put in a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of driving, and then we expect something back from the kids. And we like expect something back from the coach. Well, we paid, we did this, we did that. And I think what really happens is that we're losing perspective on what youth sports should be all about, because look, 7% will play past high school. 2% are gonna play Division 1. So the rest of that, the 93% are just getting out of it exactly what they should be, or what parents should allow for, which is character development and learning all these things about real life, that it's sort of like a practice ground for working with others, taking feedback, being a leader, learning to win gracefully, learning to lose, all these great things, the joy and the fun. I think parents at this point, and there's a lot of reasons for it. It's like we can't allow our kids to do anything anymore that is just for fun and the sake of doing it. Everything has to be about something, about getting the college scholarship. It's all outcome based, and we forget about that it's a process and a journey, and the real gold and the real, like, important things that they're getting is in the process, the journey, the losings, the failures, and so few of them will go on to do anything else with sports. So they really need to focus on those things. And I think when you can really sit back and do that, you're like, oh, why am I stressing? Why am I pushing? They're going to get all that, even if they're on the top team, the low team, whatever team. And so I think that's a big problem is the FOMO and the ROI.
What are your thoughts on specializing early before age 12 or 13 and playing a single sport for pretty much over 9 months out of the year?
Anyone who's reading, who's picking up any sort of information about youth sports, and I know you share a lot of this stuff too, it's a no-brainer, right? And I think anyone, until you're age 13, you should be playing a lot of different sports. But I think the problems that parents, what parents are trying to do, oh, all the NFL players played multiple sports. Well, yeah, because A, back then, it probably was easier to do, and B, they're super athletes, so they could play, they would be taken on a team even if they missed half the season. But what parents are trying to do instead now is this sort of multi-simultaneous sports, right? So it's, "Oh, my kid plays 3 sports," but he's playing them all at the same time. It's because you can, because there's no seasons, and it's just insanity because that's worse than sports specialization. We're basically, I had a good conversation with David Epstein, the author, a long time ago, and he made this great point. We're basically creating amazing 15-year-old athletes, and then they're peaking at 15, and then they're a downhill, bodies breaking down, mentally, physically. I just had on my podcast a college D1 soccer coach. He said, "Oh yeah, we're like changing our whole game plan of how many kids we recruit now because they're coming in broken, mentally and physically broken." And so, anyone who's, I think when you're little, the kids are little and their bodies are so pliable, and you can't imagine a day will come when they could be burned out because they love it so much, or that they would have an injury because they're just like these little, rubber bands. And you just have to you have to educate yourself. You have to, read the statistics, the research, the data. It's all there in regards to when a kid should specialize.
Yeah, if anyone gets onto Google Scholar right now and sifts through all the medical journals and the PT journals, you will find tons of studies on the dangers of early specialization. And that's such a good point that I think before age 12 or 13, especially in female athletes, everything's all fine and dandy. They're pliable.
Yeah.
They're not getting hurt that much before that age because they haven't gone through their growth spurt and things haven't gotten awkward yet. So, yeah, they're like staying healthy, they're rocking it out, they're having a great time, they're loving it. But eventually, like you said, those overuse injuries, they build up over time and they begin to manifest at age 14 during the growth spurt, or when girls put on more fat mass compared to muscle mass, or they start to get their cycle. It's just something that is probably bound to happen. And a lot of parents are surprised when it does happen, and they're not listening to people talking about early specialization, and they just kind of blow it off and they don't really look at the studies. And it's one thing I've been fighting for many years, and I hate seeing it. It every time it breaks my heart.
Erica, you can't be more spot on. And it's like literally where I spend a lot of my time thinking and trying to find creative ways to reach those parents. Because if we can reach the parents that have the young kids and haven't gone through it, and it's hard. And I was like that too. I really was. You just can't imagine a day where, like I said, they either don't wanna do it, they're burned out, or their bodies start to break down. You think you've got it figured out. My kid, like you said, before those ages, no, they never get hurt. Yeah, well, no one's kids too much really get hurt at that age, and I just think that they think they are sort of, like it's never gonna happen, and if you can figure out a way to reach those parents, that is my goal, to stop it before it happens instead of, usually it's like a lot of the people reading my stuff, even they've gone through it, they relate to it, they don't want it to happen to other people or to their other kids, and so they're definitely invested in the material that I'm putting out, but it's those younger parents with their first child that I really wanna reach.
Yeah, it's getting a lot worse for the young ones though. I just see like at the club level, they're kind of preying on parents of the really young kids because they will market and say, "Oh, like get your like U12 on our elite team so that when they get to high school, they're going to be ahead of everyone else." And I'm like, they haven't gone through puberty yet, so no one knows how good everyone's going to be anyway. Like I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but I feel the levels at the younger age groups are kind of irrelevant.
It's so silly, and what also people don't realize is they should be playing for fun at that age, because not just for their body and their health and their mental love for the game, but actually for their creativity around the game. I think we see, and I bet you would see this even more than I do at this point. you if you've gone through that system where you started at 5 and you were on a club team, which is how a lot of us do it now, and there's a coach standing over you from the time you're 5 years old, telling you what to do, directing what's going on in practice, you're not gonna be a creative player. You're not gonna have a lot of free thoughts and will about what you're doing. It really actually is detrimental to performance and development. And so for anyone listening that thinks that it's going to help their son or daughter be a better athlete, it's not. They need to be creative, they need to be trying things, they need free play without adults over top of them with cones telling them exactly which way to go and dribble and do this. They need to be running around and playing, and since we don't get that in our neighborhoods anymore, right, there's no pickup basketball games much happening at the park or pick up soccer games, or unless you're in Europe, maybe. You need to create these environments for your kids, and that's playing different sports, going to the park, kicking around with them, bringing some friends, doing whatever you can where they can be the boss of their world and they can try things without an adult standing over them, telling them what to do and telling them they're doing it wrong and them being nervous about it.
Yeah, and doing that for hours. And I
Oh,
hear some parents say, "Yeah, we got out in the backyard for 20 minutes." I'm like, "Okay, that's better than nothing." But when we were growing up, we were out there for like 5 hours a day,
hours.
and it was that variety of movement. So we were building our coordination, all those different muscle groups. I mean, look at all the games we used to play, like Foursquare and wall ball and tug
Yeah.
of war and water balloon fights. I mean, like throwback,
Yeah,
like it's just those fun
I
games,
know.
and creativity is one of those things that is slowly waning in a lot of kids, and I'm finding that they can't like problem solve as much,
Mhm.
and it really breaks my heart, and that free play that they're just not getting is really making all that suffer.
Yeah, they don't know what to do, and you give them a little time alone, and especially with phones, as that's a whole 'nother topic. But look, I was the same, and I mean, I would tell my girls, "Let's go out and shoot some hoops." We had a basket in our little cul-de-sac, and I would have the best intentions. I would be like, "This is gonna be fun. This I'm gonna have fun with them." I knew what I should do. I knew it needed to be fun. And I'd start to watch, and they would take these shots, and their form would be so bad, and I literally couldn't stop myself. Like, "Oh, okay,
Mhm.
that was so good." Like, I'd try to, like, fake like I was being, like, fun mom, but in reality, they could see through. I'm like, "No, no, like, you're going for the cookie, like, the follow through." But it was all about me correcting them the whole time, and it
Mm,
would last, like, 10 minutes. No one would wanna play with me, and none of them played basketball. None of them chose basketball, and it doesn't
mm,
surprise me at all. They called me the fun sucker and would make, like, slurping noise, and it's so true.
mm.
Like, I think it's partially personality based, like, I'm always trying to learn and get better and whatever, and so kids, their dad actually was much better about it. He could just go and let them run around and be fun and play basketball and let them shoot it up. Because you said, like, you have parents who go work in the backyard. That might not be with a coach, but if the parent is still overseeing the process, it's the same thing. You know what I mean? They really just need time to be alone with the ball, doing or their teammates or kids or friends in the park and having just creative freedom.
That's such a good point because I'm sure it is very tempting for every parent who goes in the backyard to play or do 1v1 with their kid. They just wanna throw out some coaching cues. It's another thing, to talk about, like, patience with kids, and I think a lot of us adults forget that, kids are still exploring movement, and we kinda just have to have that, like, patience and grace and be like, "You know what? Like, it's gonna be really hard to bite our tongue, but we just have to let them explore that." So that's such a good point. Now, with your kids, what have been some moments in their sports journeys where you've had to be like, no, we're not doing this, and you had to set some boundaries? Because I know you mentioned like sometimes the parent like has to let the kid steer the ship, but what are situations where the parent has to be like, this is not right?
Hmm. Yeah. I wish there's one I could kick myself for. My daughter who plays soccer had a really bad coach. And to the point where it was so, like, passive aggressive, but she started to hate soccer, and she didn't wanna go, and we were constantly working it with her in the background. I was glad she felt open enough to share that, because I think sometimes kids just, "Oh, this is what I have to deal with," and don't really share it, and we kept talking about ways to handle it and ways to work through it. I really wish I would have said something in to whether it was the director or to him. You start, I think parents often feel like somehow their kid is going to be punished, or um I don't know, like they won't make the top team next year, or like you get all these things in your head if you're going to complain. But we really need to stand up around these things. I don't know that that's the only sort of really bad situation that we've had. I myself felt my oldest daughter, and I write about her a lot. She gave me permission, thankfully, but she had a very intense water polo coach, and I love him. He's a friend of mine to this day, but she had a hard time with it, and I think we weren't listening to her. That kind of coach is not for everybody. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that he was abusive in any way, but there are certain things, and I think you have to listen to your kids, because I think that was the biggest disservice that we did. She was a very good player, and she had made a decision to go to a school to be with this great coach. Um, and you get down these paths, and then you're like, well, we're here, and you did this, and you wanted to do this, and you said you wanted to play in college. But look, they're kids. When she had those dreams, she was in eighth grade, right? And they go through so much change. She's an artist, and she would come home so tired from water polo, she couldn't do her art. And it was like, water polo, you can play for hours, and so there was, like, not a lot of limits on how much they could practice or do these things, and she didn't have the energy. But instead of, like, allowing her to take time off or allowing her to stop playing or whatever, we just kept pushing it. It was like, "She's so good at it." "Well, you said you wanted to do this." So, we weren't listening to her. And even when it's hard for our kids to tell us the truth, because they know how invested we are in it, they know that they made those choices too, we have we have to put them first. And I'm not talking about a midseason quit, or someone just doesn't feel like going to practice anymore, but I'm talking about, like, really having conversations, hard conversations with your kids, starting from the time they're very young, and being on their side, not on the side of the coach, the club, where you think they could go, how, like, what it takes to whatever, hearing them, listening to them, and seeing your whole child. And I think if you do that, the ones that are meant to play in college and meant to get to that next level, they will. And even if they need a break, even if they need a whole year off, they might still come back and do that. But if you don't give them what they need and support what they want and not what you want or a coach wants, it's almost 9 times out of 10 gonna have a really bad result.
I'm sure some parents are also wondering about the college recruiting process and how to approach that with their kid. Is that something that just like right off the bat, they need to just have a very honest conversation? Hey, like, do you want to do this? Do you want to play? Because I don't know if a lot of parents are really asking that question. It's kind of like the parent's dream and not necessarily always the kids. I don't know if you found that.
I have. I certainly have. I think that's such a good point, and it kinda goes back to what we were just talking about, really listening. I think when the kid knows you're on their side, then you're gonna find the right path and the right decision for them. And I think even the kids get caught up in that sort of keeping up with the Joneses of, like, well, everyone on my team wants to play in college, or even just being able to have that Instagram post, right? You put in all these years for what? And I think it's really the dialogue that of the parents, starting from when they're really young, having direct, honest conversation, having that trust built up. And then also, interjecting in all that conversations that there isn't just one path, that they don't have to go to college and play a sport. They don't even have to go to college if that's not what's in their heart and their dreams. It's really listening and supporting that. And then if they are really into sports and really thinking about college, how about we watch, a D2 school play? And why don't we go to a game of a D3? Why don't we visit the campuses when we're in town of not just UCLA and USC, but we also go to the smaller schools? And I think as parents, we're not even doing it on purpose. We want great things for our kids, but then when all you're talking about are these top programs, top this, top that, no one like, and there's no other conversations, then all your kids think is that they're a failure if they're not reaching these things. When everybody can have a different path that's so fulfilling, and you can play a sport you're for through college and even maybe longer through life if you have this love and this joy, if you found the right program. And I think parents can really help open that up by talking about it from a young age, wearing the t-shirt and having the coffee mug from Cal Lutheran. That's a school in my area that's a D3. I mean, like, have these things be part of the conversation for your kids, not just who you're seeing playing on national television every week.
So I know you interact with a lot of sports parents on a daily basis. What are some things these parents have told you that they have regretted the most in their child's journey?
Oh my gosh, almost all of them. And my kids have played pretty high level sports, so I'm talking mostly about those parents. Most of them regret a lot of it. Seriously, they do. They get to the finish line and they think, where did their childhood go? What was it all for? Why why was I so stressed? Like, even if your kid loves it and wants to do it, there's nothing wrong. Like, I have a kid who plays at a very high level in Division 1 soccer, and she loves it. But not every kid is going to love it. There's nothing wrong with kids who want to do that, and but I think, to back to that 93% don't, can't, or whatever. And so we spend their whole sports journey on this one path towards trying to get them to Stanford or wherever. And then you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't enjoy it. They didn't enjoy it. Now we have trouble in our relationship. Now she has, like, she doesn't want to play. Or I don't know how many kids in our circle of friends and teammates could have played in college, right? And decide, heck no, I'm done. So I think almost across the board, I see people regretting that pressure, that pushing, that stress, and not letting it be just really child led and really more balanced and taking more agency when it comes to missing, their grandparents' 80th birthday party or whatever. They look back and they just want to kick themselves that they put sports before everything.
Oh my gosh, that gives me goosebumps, and I've heard that a lot with some of the parents I've interacted with, and their kids are now in college, and I guess just how do we avoid this, and what are some just parting words of advice you would give to parents who are early on in the process right now and have really young kids in sports?
Talk to them, build their trust with the kids so that you can listen to them and let them guide. Get a mindfulness practice because you're going to need it. You really need to stay grounded. You need to keep it separate from your reactions and let them really sort of guide the way and not interject your own emotions and feelings into everything. I think every time you're making a decision, you should think, is this what's best for my child? How many of us do that? We just think, "Oh, is this what's best to get them to Stanford, to get them to this," some outcome-based thing, and I think we really need to look at that whole kid and think, "Is this what's best for them?" I think that's a huge part of it, because too often we're just doing these things and they're not about the kid. They're about all these other things, and I also think we need to give ourselves some grace because it is hard and there is no map. There is no sort of guidebook. Every kid is different. Every family's values are different. So you need to like, reassess often, give yourself grace. If you make a mistake, apologize. And also, it is back to the communication thing. My daughter, I have a high schooler who wants to play volleyball in college. And so I find that really difficult place to be when she says she wants to reach certain goals, and then I don't see her doing what she said she was going to do to reach those goals. So before I would just be like, you got to do this. You said you want to do this, whatever, with my older ones, trying to make them and force them to do things. Now the conversation goes like this. Hey, we talked about you wanting to reach this goal and you said these were the action items you were going to do. I don't see you doing a lot of those. Do you want to reassess that goal? Okay, no, you don't. You want to keep that goal. Okay. Well, do you want me to remind you and sort of help you, or would you rather I sort of just let you handle it and see how it goes? Oh, okay, you do want me to remind you. Okay. So now you've like, it's as simple as a conversation to take away a lot of that stress and pressure, and we're both on the same page. And I think that communication piece is really important. But I think overall, the main thing that I think people need to do is just remember the real reasons your child should be playing sports. And it's not about the outcomes and it's not about the ROI. It's about all those things that I mentioned earlier and all these great gifts that they get that come as much or more with failure and not reaching their goals as they do with actual success. And so if you can remember that, because as we said, 93% are not going to go past high school. If you can remember all those great gifts they're getting, then I think you'll just have a better time of it and your journey will be better and your kid will be happier and so will you.
That's brilliant. Now, Asia, I'll leave your website and all your social media in the caption below so everyone listening can follow up with you. Do you do any consulting with parents?
I do. I love talking to parents. And yeah, I'm more than happy to talk to parents and just reach out. Asia at I love to watch you play.com is my email, but on the website is all of my information as well.
Awesome. I'm sure a lot of parents listening will be getting into your DMs and reaching out. I get so many questions all the time, and I don't feel qualified at all to answer them. So I will send them all to
Send them
you.
my way. I
Yep.
love it. I would love that.
Well, thank you for this amazing conversation. Everyone listening, we so hope you enjoyed the episode. Feel free to message Asia or leave a comment like the episode, and we appreciate you listening. I will see you on the next episode.